Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 75 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. So I had such a great discussion with Dennis Murphy for this episode. And Dennis is a widowed dad in Des Moines, Iowa, and he's been raising his 3 teenagers by himself since his wife died almost 2 years ago. And he was inspired by the book, The Group, 7 Widowed Fathers Reimagine Life, and decided to start his own group for widowed dads in Des Moines. So we talked about lots of great topics, including his family's journey with his wife's cancer. We talked about, he related a funny story about putting his kids on the wrong school bus on day 1 of being a widowed parent. He talked about how he took a leave of absence from work and spent some time traveling with his kids and working on changing his approach to parenting. And he also talked about starting this group for widowed dads and offered to be a resource and help anybody who's interested in starting a group like that in their own community. So I hope you enjoy my discussion with Dennis Murphy. Hey, so before we get to today's guest, I have an exciting announcement. The Widowed Parent Podcast has its very first sponsor. It feels like such a milestone, and I couldn't be happier with this first partner. I think it's such a great fit because so many of my guests on the show have written such interesting books. So I am very happy to say that my listeners can now get a free 30-day trial of audible.com and 1 free audiobook. All you need to do is go to audibletrial.com/widowedparent. And, I've got a page on my website that lists all the books by guests of the show. So if you just go to jennylisk.com and go to the resources menu, I'm thinking you can probably find something there that would be interesting to listen to while you're walking the dog or doing yard work, which is not my favorite activity, but an audiobook does seem to make it just a bit more enjoyable. So, again, you can get that free audiobook and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/widowedparent. And thank you for supporting the show. Now, on to today's guest. My guest today is Dennis Murphy. Dennis is a widowed dad, and he's joining us today from his home in Des Moines, Iowa. Dennis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And I should say, longtime listeners may have noticed my late husband's name actually was Dennis. And it's kind of strange. I don't talk to very many Dennises in this age group. So
I don't either. I can't even tell you I have a friend or even an acquaintance with the name Dennis. So it's unusual for me too.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because my name is Jenny and there's a lot of Jennies in my age group. And in fact, one of my closest friends is also named Jenny, also spelled the same way. And that doesn't seem weird for some reason, but for some reason it seems weird to be talking to somebody named Dennis. So anyway, I'm glad you're here and I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
Same here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And so, well, let's just start out, if you don't mind, just kind of set the stage a little bit for us. If you could just back way up before your wife got sick.
Sure.
What was normal life like? Can you tell us a little bit about your family and your situation?
Well, so I'm from a very large family. I've got 6 brothers and sisters, and we're originally from Nebraska. So I was, I went to school at Creighton University in Omaha. It's a Jesuit school, primarily known for pre-med, and actually I started off pre-med, and I think organic chemistry was the changing point that had me switch careers. But I was also a ROTC student, and that's one of the 3 commissioning sources that the military uses to commission officers. So I was actually commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant, and met my wife Dareth. Knew her, but met her like 6 months before I graduated. So I'd like to think that God had a piece of that in introducing her to me. And shortly after graduation, we moved to Germany. We spent our first 3 years in Germany, traveling all over Europe. And that was great. I mean, had no kids. And
so you were stationed there with the Army?
Yeah, I was stationed there for 3 years. And so during that time, I deployed a few times. It was stressful. We did another assignment right after that at Fort Carson, Colorado. And then I separated from the military and honestly didn't think I would get back in. But again, I'm kind of come from a line of military military people. I've got a couple brother and sister that have been in, dad, grandfather that all served. And so long story short, I moved back, got back in after being out for a year. And we spent the next 21 years basically traveling all over the country and the world. That was kind of lifestyle. We'd move in, we'd do our thing for 2-3 years, and then we'd move to the next duty assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ended up 21 years. I ended up at Minnesota. That's kind of where what we're going to talk about, where a lot of this happened when we were when I was stationed in Minnesota. And
at some point along the way, you had how many kids?
We had 3. So I've got now 19, 17, and 15. They were 17. I got to do the math here. 17, 15, and 13. Boy, girl, boy. So I've got one in college and a freshman in high school and a junior in high school right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So tell us then, how did everything change? What happened? How did your wife get sick, and how did your world change?
Yeah. Well, obviously very bittersweet, that she got cancer, but even more bittersweet after 21 years of sacrificing just everything, being away from family, being away from friends. We finally got to a point where we decided to retire. And so, that being in Minnesota was great. We met a lot of great people, and we were kind of looking forward. We were going to build our retirement home, move back to Iowa, where I'd been stationed before. We're originally from Nebraska, but we felt called to come back to Iowa, really due to our church family. We have a really strong church family in Iowa. And so we were looking forward to all those things you look forward to when you not many people can say they're going to retire at, the age of 46. And, if I didn't have to work again, that'd be great. But we were finally going to be able to travel and do some stuff and just settle down and not have to move again. And around February, 2015, Dareth was having some discomfort, just different places of her body. And they thought it was like irritable bowel syndrome or maybe some bacteria. And so fast forward to February of 2016, the doctor suggested that she go in for a colonoscopy. And up to this point, neither Dareth and I had ever had one. I don't think Dareth was a big fan of doing it, but at the doctor's orders, we did it. And we didn't really expect anything to come back. We just thought, okay, well, it's another test. Well, other than just swallowing all the things you swallow for the colonoscopy, it's not really pleasant. So we went in there just kind of expecting the doctor would tell us, give us some good news. They get the results pretty quickly. So he came back in, and we're like, okay, we're ready for it. And he's like, I got some bad news. You're going to want to sit down. And then she told us that she had colon cancer.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so that was pretty devastating.
Yeah. And so that was early 2016. And so then what happened next?
We were very fortunate in the sense that we lived in Minnesota, and we were living in Mankato, so we were only about an hour and a half from Rochester. So, the treatment, that's one of the top treatment facilities in the country. And so we felt very fortunate. First thing we did is we reached out to some people that we knew that had dealt with cancer and kind of asked them how to navigate it. And long story short is colon cancer is actually one of the most treatable forms of cancer because it takes so long to grow outside the colon wall. The colon wall is pretty thick, so anywhere from 3 to 5 years to grow. And so we thought we had a pretty good chance to get it. Well, when they kind of scoped it, they found out that the cancer had metastasized basically the side of the colon and actually grown outside and actually had gotten into the lymph nodes. And so at that point, there's kind of a probability how many lymph nodes it's gotten to, kind of tells you, what's going to happen. And so it had gotten into 5, it's kind of a 50-50 proposition of whether or not it's going to, grow anywhere else. But the doctor thought, we had pretty good chances. So she went down to Rochester shortly thereafter, about a couple weeks later, had a surgery, had some, kind of, she had chemo, but it was kind of preventative chemo, trying to kill anything that might be floating out there. We went maybe 4 months of chemo, 1 or 2 times a week. And then we got tested again, and the cancer had gotten to her liver, which, basically there's a vein called the vena cava that goes from kind of the main artery, main highway for cancer that grows down there, and it got into the liver because the liver is kind of a rich place to have some of that stuff grow. So long story short, the end of 2016, she got tested again, had this, had more cancer, had to have another surgery, and then more chemo, and then she had a couple spots there that they had, or one spot I think in her liver. So we didn't, it wasn't all over the place. We felt pretty good, and she went, she went a good probably 9 months after that with nothing. I mean, just test after test, good, and then fast forward to 2017, probably late summer. 2017, she had another test, that test that I just talked about, and it had gotten all over her liver. And so at this point, they couldn't remove it with surgery. They couldn't do chemo. She had kind of exhausted her options, and we started looking for clinical trials. And so we did looked at clinical trials. We finally found one that we had to bring her numbers down. So there were quite a few months that she had to, just eat healthy. We had to cut sugar out, all those kind of things that kind of help cancer grow. And then finally, we went a little bit into 2018, and in probably June or July 2018, we finally got her into a clinical trial. And clinical trials are, number one, very hard to get into. Number two, they're very hard to qualify for. You've got to pay for them on your own. Lots of hurdles. But we finally got her numbers down. We flew to Colorado the 22nd of August, and she had a test to make sure that she could still do the clinical trial. She could. We went back to the hotel. We showed up the next morning for the clinical trial, and as I'm walking her into the hospital, she starts having just immense pain, just all over. And long story short, they admitted her to the hospital. She didn't start the clinical trial. They did some scans and had found that cancer had spread to other parts of her body.
Okay.
And so kind of the end, I mean, it was just me and my wife, and what did I do? I had to, the kids were starting school, so I had to fly home, get them started, and then I got a call that told me that we need to come back because they were looking at moving her into hospice. So,
and she was in Colorado.
She was in Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah. So they moved her from the hospital to a hospice in Colorado. They weren't going to transport her. She was, kind of critical condition at that point. So, the kids came back and kind of said their goodbyes, and then we stayed with her for a couple of days, and then before she moved to hospice, after she moved to hospice, the two younger ones went back to start school. My oldest son, 17-year-old, kind of stayed there at the end near her bedside. And we held her hand and just prayed, and we're there till the very end. And she passed away on the 28th of August at about 10:30, and we had to get clearance to bring her remains home. And my son and I, it's kind of a military thing. It's you never let a body remains transported by themselves. There's always a family member or kind of somebody that do that. So that's just kind of in my my DNA, I guess. I wasn't going to leave her. We were going to fly back with her and make sure she got home safely. And then we basically we did the funeral preparations, and we had her buried over Labor Day.
Okay. In 2018, so that's about almost coming up on 2 years ago. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us and for going through. And so your kids, then you said were 13, 15, and 17 at the time. So now, then all of a sudden, you're a single dad of 3 teenagers.
3 active teenagers.
Yeah.
3 active teenagers.
Yeah. So what was that early period like?
Oh man, I was a mess, quite frankly. I mean, just to give you an idea, like I told you that school had just started, and I remember that next week, I'm trying to get them to the bus stop. I'm trying to figure out things that I get them to this bus stop, and they get on this yellow bus, and they're heading to school. I'm like, okay, I did the first thing correctly, and I went shopping, and I get out of the Aldi from shopping, and I got 15 text messages from my kids. And basically what had happened is I had put them on the wrong bus, and they were supposed to go to Urbandale, and they went to Waukee High School. And so I had to go pick them up at Waukee High School and drive them down to Urbandale. And so at that point, I'm just like, I am not ready for this. This is a disaster. So at that point, I started reaching out to a lot of Darris friends and some of our family friends to help with figuring out, carpooling and, just all that stuff that moms do, then like do it second nature, that, guys, it just doesn't come second nature to. So yeah, it was kind of surreal. I just remember another situation where, I'm sitting at a stoplight and I'm just zoning out. I'm just not even, I don't know. I'm just thinking about things, and some lady was turning right and I bumped her from behind my car. I don't usually get car accidents, but just like, I don't know. It's like it's almost like out of body, almost kind of like out of body experiences. Like you're there, but you don't feel there. And so that first 9 months was just surreal. Like just lots of, triggers, and but really it's so busy because there's so many things you've got to do. I don't even remember sitting down. Just remember it go.
Yeah.
We were fortunate, in fact, being a military family, that I had, I'd kind of like semi-retired. I was working for a company called Wells Fargo, and decided after taking leave of absence that I was going to just not work anymore for a little while and kind of get the kids situated. So we also spent a lot of time traveling. We did we took the kids to Jamaica. We took them to Arizona. We were going to do a mission trip to Haiti that got unfortunately canceled. But my wife was big on making memories, and one thing she always said to me was never pass up a memory. And it's just, she wanted us to keep living. She wanted the kids to keep living, and she just wanted us to keep living the life that God intended for us.
But this was the start of the school year, so it must have been over school breaks and stuff. You did some of these things, or did the kids take a leave of absence from school?
I'm sorry, you cut out.
Oh, well, we are. No, we're good. We are recording in the middle of a pandemic here, and
I know. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You never know. I mean, I tell you, everybody in the world is on Zoom right now. So if we have a few more glitches, I won't be surprised. I was just thinking out loud about the fact that this all began. Your journey as a single dad began right when school was restarting then that fall. Wondering, I guess it must have been over school breaks and things that you guys did some of these adventures.
We did. We over spring break is when we went to spring break. We went to Jamaica, and then January we went to Jamaica. March we went to Arizona. We were supposed to go to Haiti over spring break, and then the really cool trip is I've told you we were stationed in Germany. I was able to take the kids over to Europe for 2 weeks, but with a twist. I told the kids, the parents are always doing all the planning here, and so I'm really big on like teaching kids like problem solving and critical thinking and having them figure things out. And so I said, you're gonna figure this trip out, and you have to plan it. And then not only did we do that, but to make it a little bit more difficult, I said, I kind of threw a wrench in. I said, and you can't plan anything until 24 hours out. Every day is gonna be planned 24 hours out. So we basically went to Europe and we winged it for 2 weeks, and it was the best vacation that we've ever taken,
awesome.
By far. And the kids were involved in all the hotel reservations and car reservations and figuring out where we go, and of course in Europe how to get to one place to the other, bus, train, boat, whatever. Yeah. So it was a great vacation.
That's awesome. Cool. Okay, so I'm curious, what kinds of things helped in those early months? Were there any, resources you found, books you read, groups you joined, anything that you found particularly helpful?
Yeah, that's a good question. Before this, I had started talking to a couple guys, primarily guys that had lost spouses, and some of them were my age demographic, some of them weren't. But, just talking to other people who have that common experience. I mean, you talk to a lot of people and they're like, I'm so sorry, for your loss. And they're empathetic. They're trying to understand, but most of them, losing a grandfather or losing an aunt or losing a kid, even a kid, is different than losing a spouse. Nothing's better or worse. It's just different. And so, and then also the difference of being a male and losing someone and being a female losing somebody. It's a different grief journey. And so, leveraging like my church at Hope, trying to find other guys specifically that have lost spouses and kind of how they navigated, how they dealt with counseling and how they dealt with, dealing with, just raising kids on their own and going back to work and things like that. the other thing is, I did start I did join a grief group, and I can't remember the name of it. It's a national grief group, but the name is escaping me. Anyway, I went in there and, with really no expectation, just having had someone suggest it to me. And, about the fourth or fifth session, I had a drop. I just, the demographic was so wide that there were too many situations, and I really wasn't getting anything out of it. And, the other piece of it, there was a lot of anger. You expect, people in grief just have lots of different experiences. And I never really had any anger, anger for God or anything, anger for, really anybody. I just, people get cancer, people, we're human. We all are going to pass away at some point. And so I found it having an adverse impact on me because it just wasn't dialed into, kind of what my needs were. And it just wasn't the probably, just the kind of anti-God aspect of it. So about that time, I had a aunt and uncle that live out in Virginia. He's a former military officer as well, and he sent me a book. Actually, I have it right here. You can't. No, your listeners can't. Your listeners can't see it. Your listeners can't see it, but I showed it to you on video.
Yes, it's a terrific book. Yep.
Yeah, terrific book. The group by Donald Ronstein and Justin Yap. And when they sent this to me, I was kind of in this, I told you it's kind of how my brain was working. I mean, just reading in general was not happening. And I just remember sitting at about 5-month mark. And this would have been, she passed away in August, so September, October, November, December. Yeah, about Christmas time, January timeframe. I picked this book up and I'm like, oh, this is okay. She sent this to me, she must want me to read it. So I picked it up and started flimming through it. And after the first 3 or 4 pages, I read the whole thing in like 2 days. I mean, it was a very, very quick read. And I'm not somebody that when I pick a book up, I'll read maybe 15, 20 pages. I'm not usually somebody that go crazy on a book, but it really resonated with me. It was basically about a group of gentlemen. These are both psychologists, and they got this group of guys. They were kind of interested in how guys deal with, grief. And I think the intent of the book was a little bit different than what actually happened. But basically what ended up happening is these group of guys who had all lost their spouses for different reasons, different ages, kind of came together as a group. And I think originally the author had intended to make it very restrictive, and he was going to kind of run the group essentially. And what he found out was it was better to let the guys kind of talk and kind of make the rules. And he kept it really kept it loosey-goosey, I think. And I, at first I was like, man, how's this going to work out? And, as I read the book, it was interesting because the guys ended up kind of taking ownership of that group. All sorts of things came up, dating again. And when do I take my wedding ring off? And, how do I deal with, teenagers? And when do I go back to work? Just some very personal things that are really hard to tell even a counselor or even a friend. And, just their common bond just enabled them to, to kind of really form this group where they were really able to kind of dive into some of those issues that are really hard as guys just to talk to anybody about, especially a counselor. The counselors mean well and they're trained, but unless they've lost a spouse or been in that situation, all they can give you is kind of their clinical approach. They can't empathize with what you're going through, whereas another guy can empathize with what you're going through.
Well, and as I recall, what all the guys in the book had in common were basically 2 things. They all lost their wives.
Yep.
And they were all dads. And they all had kids. Some were very young kids, some were teenagers, some were in between. But they were all dads with kids still at home.
Yep. And that was important to me because, early on, I was talking to a couple that had just had loss, and I found that it was different. Losing a spouse and just all that, stress of basically having to do replace a parent. And some of that, one of the things I remember early on was, sitting home, and I'm like, I'm going to have to completely change my approach, like how I parent. And I'm like, how am I going to do that? And my background's education. And so I started thinking about, I really need to understand like how they're wired. I need to understand their personalities. I need to understand their, their kind of like how what makes them tick. And so about that time I joined a Bible group at Hope, and we started talking about that same thing, and kind of the intentionality, the importance of being intentional in the way we parent. So we don't, not this, we're on this factory line and they get to the end and, they don't turn out the way we want them to turn out. And we go back and look and it's like, oh, there's some things I could have done that maybe would have changed that dynamic. And so I gave them all three of them a Myers-Briggs test. We talked about their love languages, and so we kind of figured that out, and we talked about values, the things that they value and things that we value as a family, and essentially we took all that and we created a mission statement that kind of encapsulated how we were going to live our life, how we've lived our life, and how we're going to live our life going forward. And so that enabled me to kind of come off some of the maybe stances that I had taken before and really kind of take my wife's parenting style, my parenting style, and kind of mesh those, and really just enabled me to, meet them where they're at versus meeting them where I want them to be.
That's fascinating. Okay, thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
And I do want to say for listeners, this book that you mentioned, the group 7 Widowed Fathers Reimagine Life, terrific book for all widowed parents, actually, and including especially for anybody who's a widowed dad. I would definitely encourage listeners to pick that up. And also, I did interview Justin Yap back in, I forget the episode number, but I'll put the link in the show notes because he really dives deep on, what they learned and how the group went and all that. And I think that's, it's really terrific what they're doing. And so I want to ask you, actually, I think that you've also gotten some inspiration from his group that he put together. Can you tell us what you're doing there in Des Moines?
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think some people have had experiences where they've seen a movie or read a book and they just kind of have like the aha, so I read it and it's just like, it just impacted me so much. And I just, I've always I was raised in a family where we always kind of give back. And I've always, through our journey, felt like, when I get through this, there's been so many people that have walked by my side. I want to do the same for others. And so as I read this, I'm thinking, and I'm like, there cannot be many groups out there like this. Cause I just know how guys are, guys are like, I'm okay. And I'm not going to get any help and I'll just kind of figure it out. And, it's just that it's harder to reach males that are going through trauma because they have a different timeline and they internalize a lot where females don't. Females are more willing to share some of that. So I kind of got thinking, I was like, I don't think there's anything that probably exists. So I reached out to Justin and he didn't get back to me right away. He was busy. And about that same time, I had told the church at Hope, I said, if there's anybody that is going through the same thing, I really feel called to walk by them too and share my story and just see what I can do to help. And about that time, I met a guy named Jake, good friends now, and Jake had lost his wife to cancer as well, probably 6 months after my wife passed away in 2018, and met him just a couple months after his wife passed away. And so, about that time, 2019, met him in 2019. About that time, Justin had gotten back to me. I had reached out to with him not reaching out, I thought, I don't necessarily need the author. It'd be great because he could give me some advice on how to do this, but we're just going to kind of forge on. So I had started calling funeral homes. I started calling hospitals, anywhere I could think of that, would encounter maybe another guy that's going through similar loss. And so as I did that, I found a lot of interest. A lot of them were saying the same thing. Like, I don't think anything exists. And I think that's great. And, that's the problem with some of these groups. They're so broad-based that a lot of people don't feel comfortable. And so, they don't keep going. So we made ours kind of restrictive. And it's like, guys, gentlemen who've lost kids between the ages of, birth to 18. And the reason of that is, as they get older, their needs change a little bit. And we wanted to try to keep that a little bit more tightly focused.
Wait, guys who've lost spouses?
Kids between, I'm sorry, I said kids. Spouses between they've lost spouses, but have children between the ages of birth to 18. Okay. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. And so about that time, Justin got back to me, and actually Jake and I, who were the only members of the group at that time, had a chat with him, and he was very gracious and kind of giving us, kind of peeling back the the kind of the reason he wrote the book and what his strategy was going forward, and really giving us advice on how to reach guys, how to run the group, and then how to essentially keep the group going. And so we've been in touch since then. I think his original strategy was, this was not part of his original strategy, was to kind of grow groups outside of the Chapel Hill area, but he's got a website now that's got resources on it, and that's kind of what he's doing. He's starting to reach out to other groups, other states, and trying to plant similar groups in those states. But it really has to be kind of a, what we talked about, really got to be kind of owned by someone who's kind of gone through it and really feels passionate about it. So it's kind of a difficult build, but I know here there's a need for it. I mean, we've seen it, and it's been great for the guys that are part of our group here in Des Moines.
That's awesome. So if anybody is in your area, then can you tell us a little bit about the group that you have going now in Des Moines? Yeah.
And, the nice thing about this, I mean, obviously we'd love to be able to meet face-to-face. We're not meeting face-to-face right now, but we meet kind of like every 2 weeks or as needed, but it's not, we don't go to a church. We don't go to kind of a sterile, place. We kind of go to where guys would normally go. Like, we go to a bar, we'll go to a restaurant. We kind of keep it like comfortable so that, that guys feel comfortable in showing up and actually sharing. So we thought a lot about that. We talked to Justin about that to make sure we got that right. But, he didn't necessarily do it that way, but he saw a lot of benefit in maybe mixing it up, or at least going to the same place, but, maybe somewhere away where you could have a beer and just feel a little bit more at ease, and not feel like you were, like you were in a counselor's office. And I don't say that in a bad way, but just making guys more comfortable so they'll share and show up, really just, show up consistently.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
So yeah, we meet like every 2 weeks now. It's just, virtually Zoom, we'll do Zoom. We'll have a virtual, conversation on Zoom, and, we can resume meeting together. We'll do that, but it's, kind of open-ended. We don't, I don't necessarily have we kind of have an agenda, but I don't really have like, there's not like content, we don't do that. It's more, we just talk. Sometimes we'll bring in, we might bring in, not necessarily a speaker, but maybe there's a couple guys that are struggling with a certain thing. And so we'll bring in a certain resource, and we'll talk about that resource and kind of how we navigate, whether it be counseling for kids or dating again or whatever. And that's where Hope and some of these funeral homes have come in handy, because they tap into those resources a lot more easily than we do.
Okay. And Hope is your church, which I think you said is very large and has a potentially large number of people who could be interested.
Yeah, Lutheran Church of Hope has, they reach a lot of people, not only in Des Moines, but outside of Des Moines. And they've been instrumental in just trying to tap into different resources, understanding, who are the counselors in town that are, really good with kids, and who are the counselors that are really good with guys, and, what's the protocol for dealing with, just dealing with different challenges that come up that you might assistance with, whether it be, babysitting, helping with the kids as you go back to work, or, navigating, just navigating, kid stuff that, maybe men aren't as normally involved in, from a day-to-day aspect.
So bringing those resources and ideas and tips and whatnot. Cool. Okay. And are you guys accepting new members all the time then, or how does that work?
Yeah, we are. It's kind of an open enrollment as guys join and leave. That's kind of the thing. Some guys join and it's, they stay, and some don't, and that's fine. And Justin had the same thing with his group. And there's several groups now, but the original group that was written in the original group that was written in the group, the group, there were some guys that stayed for a long time. There's some guys that, they started dating again, they got remarried, and they kind of moved on, and they're kind of like, they wanted to put that behind them, and still stayed in touch as a group, but it kind of run its course. The group had kind of run its course, and those guys had, as they became like 4, 5, 6 years removed from the group, they had kind of worked through their grief, and now they're friends. And so that's kind of the way I see this. I think as we move on, there'll be guys that come and go, and heck, I'll probably go at some point and turn this over to somebody else that feels as passionate about it as I do. But I know it's been very good for those of us that have been in the group. It's been just another resource that's really allowed us to talk about things that just you don't feel comfortable talking to a counselor about, or just kind of getting things off your chest, comparing kind of where we're at. And I've gotten a lot of ideas, just parenting ideas and strategies and things. I've also shared strategies that work for me with other guys that they've been able to leverage and make their situations a little bit more feasible.
Yeah, terrific. Well, and so I'm just sitting here thinking, so if there's a widowed dad who's local to Des Moines, they could get in touch with you. What if there's a widowed dad who is in a different community, not anywhere near you, and is thinking, gosh, this is what we need here. I'd love to have a group of guys like this. Do you have any tips or suggestions for them?
Well, the first thing I would say is reach out to me and I can give you my contact information. I would love, as would Justin, to help you set something up. I feel passionate a bit about that, and it's not super hard. It took us a little bit of time at the beginning to make the contacts and kind of maybe recontact them at some point just to make sure we're still alive and still here and still functioning. But the other thing is you could do this virtually too. If anything, this pandemic has shown us that you can do things virtually. It's probably not maybe not as good, but even tapping into our group from here while maybe other groups get set up. That maybe way of kind of showing them how our group functions while they're trying to set something up in their communities. Regardless of what sizes, because some communities have more resources than others depending on size. So you may have to kind of change your approach a little bit based on how you set that up. But
yeah. Okay. Terrific. Good. Well, make sure to share your contact information. I'll ask you in a second about how people can reach you. But I'm noticing that we are almost out of time today. I think we could keep talking about this all day.
I could. Let's do it.
Well, let me just ask, kind of as a way of wrapping up, if you could say one thing to newly widowed dads, what would you say to them?
Man, you left the hardest question for the end. It is a bumpy road. There's lots of, you've got good days, bad days. You've got good moments, bad moments. Luckily, I've got more good moments now than bad moments. You're kind of in the fight the first 6 months. You just don't know if you're going to make it. There's a lot of days where you just go home, you go to bed tired, you're exhausted, emotionally drained. I'm very fortunate. I come from a very loving family. I'm surrounded by faith believers that just kind of poured into me. And what I found is that even during my really darkest time and darkest moments, and just didn't think that I'd sit there and ask God, are you sure that I'm the best choice for these kids? And, it seemed like every single time something like that happened, there'd be somebody that would reach out and, offer us to make us food, or, just helping take the kids to school. And so I think really leveraging those resources, you have to kind of get over your pride. I just remember being very proud, I'm not going to ask any help. I can do this myself. And, it's there's just lots of times you just have to say yes. Somebody wants to help, there's a reason they're asking. And it's not necessarily, even if it's not for you, it's probably for them. A lot of that's healing is for other people who are also grieving, and they just want to help. And so I finally, and I don't remember who, somebody told me you just need to say yes more. Just say yes all the time. And just say yes, and don't be proud about accepting help and things like that. The other thing I would say is getting help. I did not get help right away for the kids. I didn't get help right away for myself. I did end up doing some counseling. I didn't do it right away. I should have. And the reason I say that is because, my situation, I thought I had gotten through all the stages of grief, and that wasn't the case. About the 1 year mark, I don't know, something about the finality of her death really it just hit me. And, luckily, it was very hard. I had about 7 really, really hard months from, about the 1 year mark to about the 1.5 year mark. And luckily all those people I, kind of poured into this first year, and beyond that were there for me. Family, friends, hope people. I was very fortunate that was the case. And, again, I had lots of folks telling me you need to kind of work through this grief, and everybody works through it differently, but leveraging those resources is really important, I think. And then last, I think just being very intentional. I mentioned before about one of the things I had done with the kids and understanding what their needs are. And obviously, maybe can't do that with younger kids, but I think you can do a version of that. Understanding that you're not dad anymore, you're mom, dad, or dad, mom. However you want to hyphenate that. And you got to change your approach to be effective, so that you don't get to the point where you're getting frustrated. And I think just being very intentional about what it is you want to do is important, while giving yourself a break. I think I made a mistake the first 9 months. I've got to do this exactly the way mom did it, because if I don't, it's gonna mess everything up. And I think kind of giving yourself a break and understanding that it's okay. It's okay not to be okay, and it's okay not to do everything exactly the same way. You have to modify your approach, and you have to modify kind of how you do things, so that you parent effectively going forward.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I think that's a great place to end. So my guest today is Dennis Murphy, who's a widowed dad in Des Moines, Iowa. So Dennis, where can listeners find you if they'd like to connect with you or learn more about starting a group like you have?
Yeah. Well, my email, I'll give you my email, and then I'm going to see if I can. I'm also going to give you the website for where the story or the group where the resources are. But my email is ddmurph11@gmail.com, and phonetically that would be the military guy. Phonetically that'd be Delta Delta Mike Uniform Romeo Papa Hotel 11@gmail.com. And then I thought you'd get a kick out of that. And then the website for is called Widowed Parent, and it's so everything with the group, and then to include our group and any other groups that are out there, is at www.widowed, so widowed, parent.org. So www.widowedparent.org.
Terrific. Okay, and that's the website for Justin Yopp's group.
For Justin Yopp's group,
and
yep.
all the resources. They've put together terrific resources there, including some videos and other things. Good. I'll be sure to link that in the show notes. Well, Dennis, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
It was great being your guest, and thank you for taking the time to interview me. I really enjoyed it, actually.
Yeah, me too. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Dennis Murphy as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 75. And today, a big shout out to all of the listeners in Iowa in honor of today's guest. And a big thank you to Buffy Peters at Hamilton's Academy of Grief and Loss for introducing us and for being such a big supporter of the podcast. And by the way, Hamilton's has a terrific resource library on their website. I'd encourage you to check it out. Probably the easiest way to find it is to go to the show notes for episode 19, which is when I interviewed Buffy along with Sasha Mudloff at Hamilton's Academy of Grief and Loss. Terrific discussion. Please do listen to that if you didn't yet. And also see the resource library on their website. There's a whole bunch of free printable PDFs broken down on every different topic related to grief. Different ages of kids, different types of loss, different questions, different circumstances. I think you'll find those resources really helpful. So again, look for the link in the show notes for episode 19 for that one. So in last week's email, I mentioned that there's a new Pete Davidson movie. It's called The King of Staten Island. I wonder if you've had a chance to see it. If you have, shoot me a note and let me know what you thought. I thought it was in a lot of ways, it was a portrait of a family with unresolved grief. And in the movie, you can see Pete's character struggling, his sister struggling, his mother struggling. Their dad died 17 years ago, the character's dad. And so I thought it was really interesting, and I noticed several aspects that, are pretty common experiences of childhood grief. And I actually put together a new short video talking about this. If you're a subscriber on my YouTube channel, you may have seen it. And if not, please do go over to my YouTube channel. I'm Jenny Lisk on YouTube. And make sure you subscribe so that you can catch future videos as well. And by the way, if you're not getting my emails, please do go to my website. It's jennylisk.com, JENNYLISK.com. And at the bottom of probably just about every page, there's a short form you can fill out. Make sure you're getting the emails and not miss an episode each week. I also send out other resources that I think will be useful, articles and websites and information that I think will be useful to listeners as well. So as far as a quick update on the book that I'm working on, so as you know, I'm working on a memoir about the 8 months when my husband was sick, and it's based on the Caring Bridge journal that I kept at the time to keep everyone updated on what was going on. I actually took a little pause on the rewrites and just finished reading like a 450-page book. It's called The Anatomy of Story. It's very interesting, actually. And it gave me a lot of good, I think, insights and information about how to make sure I'm paying attention to the structure and the bigger picture of the story, so that, you know, the themes are developed and it's so there's an overall point to it. So I now am starting working on the rewrites. I'm looking here, you can't see me, but on the wall above my desk I've put all these index cards, and I'm kind of identifying different parts of the manuscript and putting them on index cards. So I got a little more work to do there, but anyway, I'm planning on launching it in October. Cross your fingers. So if you're interested in joining the launch team, you can go to my website, jennylisk.com/memoir. There's a little form to fill out. And being on the launch team, it's easy, it's fun. You'll get some, early insights and help spread the word. So I hope you'll go and do that if you're interested. Okay, let's see what else. Remember, if you'd like to try listening to audiobooks and you're not yet a member of Audible, you can go to audibletrial.com/widowedparent and get a free 30-day trial and a free audiobook and help support the podcast as well. So, and even though the link is audibletrial.com/widowedparent, the link is not just for widowed parents, of course, so you can feel free to share that with anybody else who might like to try Audible. Okay, thank you for listening. Until next week, keep smiling.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.